Hey, what's going on? It's Andy Blanks again from YM360 with another teacher prep video from our Amplify Bible study curriculum. This teacher prep video is for lesson 11, and lesson 11 is the first lesson on a 3-lesson look at obedience. Now, obedience is something that maybe your students aren't going to get super fired up about at first thought, right? We sort of have that natural tendency to sort of chafe a little bit when we talk about obedience. And that's kind of the whole issue. That's kind of the whole issue with sin and rebellion, is that by our very nature, we are not obedient. We resist God's laws. We resist God's ways because of our sin nature. But it wasn't always like that. And in fact, part of what this lesson is going to show is that the foundation of our relationship with God was sort of predicated upon obeying Him. And so we have this moment we're going to look at where God is sort of talking to Adam, and He's telling Adam all about I don't know, like the rules of the Garden of Eden, right? He's talking to him about this existence of the garden. I've given you all these things, and all of this is yours, right? There's these trees you can't eat from. There's these trees in the middle of the garden. There's one you can't eat from. You can't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, right? It's a rule. God says to Adam, I've given you all of this. I've provided you for everything. You don't have to want for anything. I've given you everything you could possibly need. Furthermore, you're in a relationship with me. So not only do you have all the provision you need, but you're in this wonderful, harmonious relationship, and all you got to do is obey this one rule. What does Adam do? We know that Adam and Eve disobeyed that rule, and they ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and that's original sin, and they were kicked out of the garden. And ever since then, there's been tension between God and man, because humankind, we can't keep God's rules. So obedience is kind of the heart of what it means to follow after God. When we look at God, not only did we see that in the Garden of Eden, but when we look at God sort of talking to Israel at the beginning of His relationship with them, calling a people to Himself, there was a covenant. And what was one side of that covenant? That God was going to faithfully be the God of His people and the God of their God alone, right? The God of the nation of Israel. What were the Israelites supposed to do? Keep God's commands. Keep God's commands. That's it. Obedience, again, the basis, the foundation of relationship with God. Of course, we know they couldn't do that, and we'll get to that. We'll really drill down on that next lesson. But so obedience is kind of this foundational concept in our relationship with God. We want to kind of flesh this out a little bit in this lesson. We want to point out that we obey God because of who He is, because God is uniquely suited for our obedience. There is no one but God who can command our entire obedience like He does, because He's life-giver and He's eternal and all His ways are good. And so God deserves our ultimate obedience and our complete and comprehensive obedience in that relationship with Him. And then finally, we want to talk about this idea with your students that obedience, obeying God, is not harsh. It doesn't take the fun out of things. It's not meant to really kind of break us down. That obedience to God is extremely fulfilling because it happens in relationship with the Creator, King of the universe, right? And David sort of helps us see this, where David says that he meditates on the decrees of God and he delights in the decrees. He delights in the rules and the laws of God, that they bring his soul joy, and that he hides them in his heart, that he loves to follow God's statutes and delights after His decrees. For us, sometimes that can seem a very foreign concept, can it? To want to obey God, to want to just be under God's guidance. But that's because we have our sin natures. We're sinful in our hearts. When we realize the fact that God alone is worth following, God alone is worth obeying, and that obedience leads to life in God, it kind of changes that perspective on it. So this is a foundational lesson. You'll hear me say that a lot in these teacher prep videos. As you pass through these series as you're studying Amplify, the first lesson in all these series is very foundational. We're trying to teach a concept where we see this concept flowing out of the character of God, and then we always look at it again, of course, through the lens of the gospel, and then through a very hyper-focused application of it. So as you ground this truth in the character of God, I hope your students have a wonderful time learning about and considering obedience, maybe from a different angle than they have before. And I hope it leads to a deeper understanding of God and His Word. So have a good time teaching this. If we can help you with anything, please let us know. Look forward to hearing how it goes, and I'll see you on the next teacher prep video. Take care.